This is a beautiful city of commerce in the state of Washington. My name is Jong-woo Han. I am the president of Korean War Legacy Foundation, which has more than 1,500 Korean War veterans interviewed, not just from the United States, but also from other 21 countries that participated in the Korean War.
Wow.
We are doing this to preserve your memory because it's been already more than 70 years ago since the breakout of the Korean War in 1950. But at the same time, we want to honor your service and the sacrifice and of many Korean War veterans.
Thank you.
Most importantly, Korean War has been known as forgotten war, and we want to challenge that. We want to correct that. So this interview will be made into curricular resources by the teachers, for the teachers, so that they can use this interview of yours when they talk about the Korean War in the classroom. So that's why we are doing this. We believe that the best and the only way that we can transfer the legacy of Korean War and your legacy into the future generation has to be through educators. So that's why we are doing this. It's my great honor and pleasure to meet you, sir, and thank you for receiving me in your beautiful home. And please say your name and spell it for the audience, please.
My full name is Gene, Gene, middle name William, and Davidson, Davidson.
Thank you.
And
what's your birthday?
And I've gone by Bill all of my life, middle name. My birth date is 3/3/33.
33.
33, yeah.
You are in love with 3.
Yeah. It has served me well.
March 3rd, 1933.
That's correct.
So you are a pretty young man.
I'm working on it.
Uh-huh. So that makes you, what is it, 89?
89.
Yeah. You look great, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And where were you born?
I was born in Glendale, California. That's a
G-L-A-N.
Glendale. Uh-huh.
And tell me, please, about your family background when you were growing up, your parents and your siblings.
Okay, I have a sister and myself. And then my mom and dad, I was born in Glendale, California, so that put me about 12 miles away from downtown Los Angeles.
Ah, very close to.
But that was, it was a very big city to a little child, but compared to today, where I grew up, the town was maybe 30,000. Now it's over 4 million, which Korea is thinking, well, that's small.
Yeah.
But I went through elementary school and high school, and then after the
What high school?
Van Nuys High School.
Can you spell it?
V as in Victor, A-N-Y-Y-S, Van Nuys, California.
V-A-N-Y-S.
I have trouble spelling.
High school.
V-A-N, and then another word, Nuys, N-Y-S-E.
Van Nuys High School in California, right?
In California.
What year was it?
I graduated in 51.
So this is very good. You were in the high school when the Korean War broke out. That's very good because most of the Korean War veterans already graduated before the breakout of the Korean War. Did you learn anything about Korean War from your teacher or in the curriculum?
No, sir. It was still very focused on growing up after the war, people, you know, that came back from the war, World War II, and they really didn't do anything about the Korean War. I heard that there was a war, and I was thinking to myself that, boy, I hope I don't have to go to war because of my experience and fright at that time, because blackout at night times and planes flying overhead, you didn't know who they were. Anyway, I had no talk that I can remember from any of my history classes in high school. It was just like we don't want to get involved kind of feeling. And I know I tried to find out where that war was because I had never heard of Korea. And I finally learned that it was close to Japan, and Japan didn't have a very good flavor in my mind. But I did pay attention to what newscast would come out. And sure enough, I realized that, okay, I'm graduating from high school. How long will that war last? Because it was a draft system. And so when I turned 19, I got my draft notice. And it said, welcome. We want to inform you, and so forth. And so I don't know how much longer you want me to go in this vein, but
I have a question there. Wasn't it kind of surprising that teacher or not many people talking about the war, because war just broke out, right?
yeah,
I mean, so there is a war broke out, and U.S. has involved, right? Because you graduated in 1951, and already U.S. war there, right? Was there, soldiers were there. So I think it's kind of natural that teachers can talk about, hey, there is a war, and it's happening in the Korea. Have you heard about Korea? Where is it? You know, we can talk about brief history of Korea, but never happened like that.
not to my recollection.
That's really shocking.
Yeah. But when I got closer to being drafted,
Yeah,
I paid more attention.
you did by yourself.
Yeah.
What did you find out?
Well, I just knew that the war was still raging. The only way we could get current news was to go to Los Angeles and to a theater that they called Current News.
Yeah.
And that was quite a trip. Mustered us into the Army and did a lot of tests, as well as mental and geographical tests and things like that. And I had some very good training in junior college in business machines and equipment. And I learned how to type very well. And little did I know that that was going to predetermine what I did in the war. And then they assigned me to the 101st Signal Battalion, which was in San Luis Obispo, California, to the 101st Signal Battalion, and eventually got assigned to R&M Company, and that stood for Radio and Messages. And long story short, I got my assignment to Korea.
When was it?
I didn't remember the exact date that I shipped out.
Mm-hmm. What year? What year was it? 1953, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the year was 53. I don't know the exact month. I think it was February.
Or April or February?
February of 53.
Okay. From
Yeah.
where? St. Louis? Fort Louis?
No, not Fort Lewis. San Luis Obispo, and that was the town. And that's on the west coast, just below San Francisco.
Yeah. So you departed for Korea from San Francisco?
Yes.
Yeah. And where did you arrive in Korea?
Busan.
Busan?
But we didn't, that wasn't our first landing. Our first landing was in Japan. And then we went by ship over to Busan.
Do you remember what month you arrived there? Around March or April?
I think that booklet over there gives the date, but I don't remember it right now. But it probably was, it could have been between, if I left in February, March, it would have been April.
April, right. And then you arrived in Busan, and then you went up to north right away.
Well, no, there a week in what I called a prison.
Mm-hmm.
And
why do you call it prison?
Because we were behind wire fencing, mm-hmm. and couldn't get in or out. You had to stay right in your tent. Mm-hmm. And so we just called it our holding prison. Mm-hmm. And I was so devastated by the war-torn images of children with missing limbs, begging, people living in cardboard housing, total anguish, that it just, in a way, I was glad to be in the prison for for a couple of days, because I had to get a hold of myself and prepare myself for even things that were worse. And so then we got on a train that took all night to get us from Busan to Seoul. It would go for a while, then it would stop. All black out. We were in full combat gear. And what was happening, I found out later, was that they were sending runners out ahead of the train to be sure the tracks were still intact. Mm. And then it could move that far. But then we got to Seoul, and I was only there probably a week. And then we got my orders for 101st Signal Battalion, R&M, 101st Signal Battalion, mm-hmm. R&M Company, attached to 9th Corps, which was up, that was on the front lines, or just behind them. And then I learned.
But before you go into others, you said that you stayed in Seoul for a week, right? How was Seoul at the time?
I've got a picture of it over there. It was a ghost.
Give me the detail as you described about Busan.
It would be in one of the smaller pictures, but
right. Can you describe?
Seoul it seemed like every building had been blown apart. Just skeletons. We had an army base there, but everything else was shambles. And that was disheartening to think what war does. It's my first experience at, boy, I hope that's the right one that you're looking at.
Yeah, I'm looking at the destroyed buildings.
Okay, all right.
And did you take this picture, or did you get it from others?
No, I took those pictures.
You took it. You had a camera at the time.
Yeah, I purchased, well, it was later, but it was still the ravages of war. Right, right. So
Seoul was completely destroyed.
yes. Now that's just what you're looking at there was just a gift from the Korean people.
When did you get this coin?
I got that about a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago here, a Korean church
Yeah, it's
sponsored.
the Takuma First Baptist Church.
Yeah.
The pastor, main pastor, was my brother-in-law.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I was there.
You were there for that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Pastor Choi and his wife is Han, and she's my sister.
okay. Well, I'm going to tell you that was really the first time that I felt some closure to the Korean War, because when we got home, we didn't have any reception. Nobody was playing a band for the Stars and Stripes Forever. No announcements that we're home. It was similar to Vietnam. It was a precursor to Vietnam vets coming home. And that kind of overshadowed Korea, the Vietnam War. But anyway, I so appreciated Korea people for making that presentation, and there's another one over there in that blue container. But anyway, what furthermore do you want?
So Seoul was really shambles.
Shambles?
And from there, where did you go?
Well, we went up, I would guess it was about 15 to 20 miles north to where we were encamped. And I know it was on the edge of a valley that was considered the Bloody Valley, the bloodiest war in Korea, coming up through that valley. Yeah. And I remember seeing a few jets, which were brand new, introduced to Korea, strafing the mountains as they came up through that valley. So I can't tell you exactly where we were. I couldn't even write home to my parents and tell them where we were, because everything was secret. All of our delivering messages to the front lines. And so that tells me that we were very close to the DMZ line before the fighting.
It's okay. Just
Okay.
leave it.
Because the fighting hadn't stopped yet. And so we would have to maneuver. I'd take the message off of teletype that would come from either Seoul or it would come from the United States. I'd have to route it to where its intent was to go. A routine message, we could wait until it was right time to deliver it. But when we got to operational immediate, that meant you jump on it right now.
Right.
and then it has to be delivered. So I was also one who would take the Jeep with a shotgun guard and drive at nighttime, cat eyes only for vision, as far as the road would take us. And how I knew where to go on foot, I can't tell you. But I did, and the message had to get there. And I had one particular vivid memory of delivering a message to a radio rig tucked back in the front line. And the message was relocate immediately. And as I was walking back to my Jeep, the radio rig pulled out, and we hadn't gotten out of sight, and that whole area just blew up. And
you could have been killed.
I could have been killed, and the radio rig people could have been killed. And no telling, there may have been other people close by, but that was the importance of operational immediate.
Exactly.
And the last one was flash. And the flash message was that there has been a breakthrough in the line that they were holding. And you had to, all units had to be notified. There's been a breakthrough in the line and so place. So
your specialty was radio operation.
No, my specialty was taking the messages off the teletype and routing it to a declassified area. I was cleared for top secret. No, I was cleared for secret. Top secret, only top secret clearance people could see the message. So it would go to them in one form of cryptography, and then they had to change it and then give me the message back and say, deliver this. And it was up to me to get it to the front line.
What was your rank at the time?
Well, I started out just a big old private. And it was...
Suppose your mission and your duty was to transfer and transport these very important messages, encrypted and decrypted, so that you're in the Jeep, guarded by the guns, and you are able to do those things.
Yes.
It was critical.
Yes.
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 The Operation Immediate flash flash messages, those are the very special kind of, tech word.
Yes. Can I give you an interesting story
Sure.
on that message?
Yeah.
Okay. This is basically after the fighting, because it was then my first year as winter in Korea. And obviously, all of the units there got winter clothing.
You mean after the war?
After the war.
Yes.
And see, I got there in the spring.
Right.
And so I went through summer, then winter. That was my first winter.
Right.
And everybody got issued their winter clothing except for me. I'm 6'6", size 14 shoe.
14?
Yeah. And so it was getting colder, and I went to the supply sergeant at 9th Corps and said, I'm being exposed very soon to very cold weather, and I need boots, 14. And he said, I'll try to get them for you. Well, I don't remember the exact time, but I think it was a week later that I went back and told him, it's really getting cold. And I got nothing. So one night I had to deliver a message, and I got caught in a whiteout blizzard, and I had to deliver this message, and I did. But we got caught in that whiteout. We couldn't even see the tracks of the Jeep to know whether we were going on the road or not. So when I got back to the bunker, I had no feeling from my knees down. They had to carry me in. And obviously I had very strong frostbite. As my feet were thawing out the pain, I decided I'm writing my mother to get the name of my senator. And I left out that I had gone to my company commander, chain of command. And so I wrote a letter to my mom, knowing it would be 10 days before it got to her. And on, I think it was the 11th day, the teletype machine goes ding, 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 4 dings, operational immediate, from the commanding officer of the United States of America to the commanding general of 8th Army in Seoul, Korea, to the commanding general of 9th Corps, our attachment, to the commanding officer of 101st Signal Battalion concerning, and I'm typing this, Gene William Davidson. And I kid you not, the next day, we stood at attention. Those who were not doing the job were in the... Anyway, we had to stand tall because the general was arriving in a helicopter. And you got the picture.
Yeah.
He brought me size 14 boots. And the rest of it is an interesting story, but I'll just say that that was a very shocking experience for me. My mother wrote President Eisenhower a letter, and I've got a copy of the teletype tape that came on the machine.
You have it?
I have it today.
Where is it?
Oh, I'd have to go spend some time looking for it. That's my, those are my, yeah.
I need that.
You need that?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready to get rid of it.
No, you should not. That's a funny story, but it's a very, see how important the telecommunication is, you know?
Yeah.
Because you know how to do those things.
Yeah.
It's like an internet in 1950, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that my grandson in that book detailed the specifics of all of that. The supply sergeant ended up getting court-martialed. That's a sad part of the story. But it adversely affected me for life.
It's a boot.
It's called a Charcot boot.
Uh-huh. And because you got the frostbite?
That's, well, it's an end result.
And
I didn't have to wear this since then. My feet did recover, but I lost all feeling in them.
I see.
And then here about 5 years ago, I started having some major issues with my leg and feet. And so I've got that for life, as long as I live. I'm grateful, I'm eternally grateful to my God that I came home.
In one piece.
In one piece, and I was able to go to college and go to graduate school. And God's been very faithful to Judy and me for 61 years.
Any other episode that you want to share with this interview about your service in Korea from spring of 1953 to...
Any episode?
Yeah, any other episode that you remember? Like a boot size 14.
Well, being 6'6", I was a target.
Yeah.
Even
like
with even with everybody that, well, for particularly the Korean people, you know, they're barely 5'4" at the most, some of them.
At the time.
And yeah, and so when I would have to go back after the fighting had stopped, I would have to drive a 2.5-ton truck back to Seoul to get some supplies. Everybody would run up to me and try to figure out where their heads ended on my height. And I just enjoyed it because I know I was a spectacle. And I was the tallest man in our company. In fact, in our whole division.
Yeah.
But I would say before the fighting stopped, and actually for a couple of months after, there were ambushes. But every delivery I viewed as life and death. And if I can get it to the area where it's supposed to go, it would save lives. If I lost my life in doing it, at least I saved lives. So I want to, if I can talk about one spiritual thing.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, my dad gave me a passage of scripture to memorize. And it was 2 Timothy 2, 3, and 4. And I didn't really understand it until the war. Because it says, "Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No man entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who has chosen him to be a soldier." And I became very aware of the meaning of that verse of scripture in Korea at the war. And I realized the full meaning of what it means to be fully committed. I had a job to do, and I was doing it by God's grace. And it was very important to hold me firm in my life. And so I'm very grateful that my dad asked me to memorize those verses, even though I didn't understand their full force. Now I'm home, and I understand we're in the same army of God, that we're to bring glory to his name and to live our lives to bring glory to him as we would a soldier going to war. Yes. You know? And that's what's holding me in my faith.
So when did you leave Korea?
I left it in November. I got home 54. And I got home 3 days before Thanksgiving. And I, of course, didn't notify my parents because I didn't know how long the ship would take to come back. It took 18 days going. And so what they did for us, they said, if you live within 50 miles of Fort Ord, you can go home for Thanksgiving. I told a lie. I said, I live within 50 miles of Fort Ord, but it was really 200.
Yep.
And I got home, we hitchhiked a ride from Fort Ord to Los Angeles, and I got off in Van Nuys, called my mom on the phone. And what a shock for her.
Yeah.
And I made it for Thanksgiving dinner, and the next day I flew back to Fort Ord.
Just 20 miles from Fort Ord.
No, Fort Ord was 200 miles.
I know, but you said 20 miles.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
Have you been back to Korea since then?
You know, I was invited to come back. My biggest joy was I was in Christian school movement all 37 years.
Mm-hmm.
I had 6 years in public education. But we brought a Korean choir, girls' choir, from Korea over here to minister to people on the West Coast and the South. And it was Dr. Hong was the superintendent of that girls' school, and I understand it had 10,000 girls. I couldn't believe it, that their school was that big. And to make a story short, that's the school that asked me to come back and talk to their classes. But my memory of those Korean girls, we had 90 concerts in 30 days. That's a lot of travel and a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Not one of them got sick.
Mm-hmm.
They ate crates of apples.
So you've never been back to Korea?
No, they invited me to come, but it didn't work out for me to go.
Right.
And then lately, through the Korean Vet magazine, they are sponsoring
Yeah.
trips, but I can't go because I have to have treatment every other day, and it has to be every week at Portland, VA, you know. So I've not been able to go back.
But are you following up with what's going on in Korean economy and democracy and so on? Do you know?
Not well. I pick up things here and there, and through the Korean magazine that I've got, I don't want to disturb too many things here. They'll end up on the floor. But anyway, that talks about Korean influences, what's going on, and how we're keeping that alive. But I'm really concerned about the talk of unification. It is very complicated, and I would want to see South Korea stay safe. And I don't know how that could be accomplished. But I certainly support anything that comes my way in, I would have to say, the politics that's going on that favors South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
You people have been through so much, and the rebuilding. I got a picture about 4 years ago of Seoul, and I couldn't believe my eyes. And you've done it to your economy as a testimony to the world. And that says a lot, and I have to tie it into God's provision for you people. Because I know that after the war, you were known as a country of prayer. And I know that most of the people got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to pray before they got into their day's work.
Morning dawn prayer.
There you go.
Yep.
And God is blessed. But I fear for Korea as I do for the United States of America, where little factions here and there start to pull in the wrong direction. And America is seeing an unrecognizable carnage
Yep.
that's facing us because we have stepped away from trusting God. And so I have that concern that there would be factions caused by North Koreans that would tear down South Korea. I have
very legitimate concern, yes.
Mhm.
But that's why the importance of U.S. and Korea is really stands out now at this point, you know. And President Biden and former president, they all visited, and they want to make sure that we have everything okay, not to get another attack from North Korea, right?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think that Korean War, known as Forgotten War, despite such, you just mentioned that you couldn't believe your eyes to look at Seoul, Korea now. You can compare that with Seoul you saw, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How can you compare that? And I mean, if you are Christian,
Yes.
Christian and very devoted, and if you look at John chapter 1:46, where that Jesus began to pick up his disciple, right?
Yeah.
And he got Philip, and Philip introduced Jesus to his friends Nathaniel,
Uh-huh.
who was meditating under the fig tree.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And Philip said to Nathaniel, saying that there is a rabbi from Nazareth. And you know how Nathaniel replied back to Philip?
Uh-huh.
What did he say?
I don't remember. You got to help me.
Yeah, I will help you.
I remember the story.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Nathaniel replied back to Philip saying, what good can come out of Nazareth?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes. The Korea you saw in 1953 and 54 was like a Nazareth.
Uh-huh.
Right?
What good can come out of it?
Yeah. The Gentile, Nazareth was Gentile, right?
Yes.
It's corrupt to the eyes of the Jewish people who are in the south, right?
Yes. Yes.
But out of Nazareth, Jesus came, right?
Mm-hmm.
Korea in 1950 is just like a Nazareth. South Korea now is something like that, right?
Yes. I see your analogy.
Do you agree?
I agree.
Yeah. So that was the title that I used in the beginning of my foundation's conference for the descendants of Korean War veterans, like your grandsons and so on. So what good can come out of Korean War? There's a Republic of Korea. Good thing, right?
Yes.
But still known as Forgotten War.
Yeah. And why?
Why?
Well, politically, I feel that they looked at the Korean War as just a police action.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know at what point they started talking about it being a war instead of a police action. But with that in view, I think there was a lot of politics for some reason with the United States to not call it a war. So if it was at the level of a police action, well, that wouldn't be any different than one area where in Portland they tried to destroy the city. And it's forgotten. We haven't forgotten what happened in Portland yet, but I think primarily the kids that have grown up in the last generation have forgotten it. I don't know how much is taught in schools today about the Korean War. I have a feeling it's nothing. And so time brings loss of memory, just like an age. We lose track of some things.
Right. Looking back all those years, as you as a Korean War veteran, what do you think it happened to you personally? How do you put that into perspective? You were there, you were carrying very important messages, critical for the safety of lots of American soldiers and also for Korean people. And you finished your mission there with the provision, the providence of God.
Mm-hmm.
Now Korea has become so powerful economically and very democratic. Now you've never been to, but you know what's going on there. So how do you put that into perspective, especially in your life?
As to how the Korean War affected me?
You, okay. And also, something that you did for the Korea?
Well, obviously, I was very grateful when the war ended, but we had a lot of cleanup to do. And I recall that every day was a full-day commitment to get what we called trivial jobs done. Mm-hmm. But it taught me the importance of making sure you get the job done right. Because I hadn't really worked for anybody until the Korean War. I came back from Korea. We didn't know about post-traumatic syndrome. The word hadn't been invented yet. And I just remember it was a good 3 months of feeling lost. Lost in the sense of just not knowing what to do and how I could get help to get started. My parents encouraged me to go out and look for jobs. And I did. And I went to work for North American Aviation, testing jet wing titanium, if it was strong enough to be used, you know. And I was struggling, and I found some friends, but they were not good friends. I'd have to excuse myself many times. And I finally realized that I needed to get back to some Bible training. And that's when I really committed my life to Bible study as well as educational study. But at that time, it was called Bible College, Biola Bible Institute of Los Angeles.
Yep.
And it became a university while we were there. And it took 5 years to get my education teaching degree because we had to have, and I wanted them, 30 units of Bible in order to graduate. So we got a good purview of all of Scripture and some individual Bible training. And so what I took out of the Korean War after I got my wits together was that we have to work hard to make a place for ourselves, not just in business, but in our relationship to God, to make what we do in business better. And so I drew those kinds of lessons out of the Korean War. I don't think of anything else right now.
That's a very good lesson that you pointed out as a man of Christianity and devoted. So I think, and as you mentioned, Korea has become one of the Christian country that has sent missionaries.
That's
In
marvelous.
terms of population ratio, I think it's number one. They send out in terms of ratio, you know, versus the total number of missionary and the population versus number of missionaries that U.S. population, Korea is higher than the United States in terms of the missionary mission. So that's really something that stands out, as you pointed out. Any other episode that you remember during your service in Korea?
I think I've said enough. I am forever grateful to the Korean people that have been so gracious. I think you have far exceeded whatever the United States has done for me in terms of healing from the war. And I am eternally grateful for that. And I'm so glad to hear the spiritual condition of Korea today. And I wish that I had been able to go back and visit.
Yeah, that would have been fantastic. You're not going to believe your eyes. I want to thank you on behalf of Korean nation for your honorable service and sacrifice.
Thank you.